All right, we are to the final lectures, and so these are not necessarily posted in chronological order in the 20th century, but this one is about a French composer who immigrated to America, and it's kind of really more considered an American composer, Edgar Varese. If you're familiar with the legendary musician Frank Zappa, who also ran for president of the United States, Varese was said to be his favorite composer, and Frank Zappa actually called him out of a yellow phone book to ask him some questions. So the piece that is in the book about Edgar Varese is a very, very famous work called Poeme Electronique, or an electronic poem. And this happened at the Brussels World's Fair in 1958. This is the first World's Fair after World War II. And this is one of the early electronic works, not the earliest, but one of the earlier works that used in electronics. The first officially documented electronic music was the Étude au chemin de fer by Pierre Schaeffer, French composer / radio engineer, in 1948. So electronic music has actually been around for 70 something years. It's done on computers today, but done in different ways back then, but it is not anything that's radically new. It was radically new in 1948 and was kind of a byproduct of needing something other than humans to perform, because a lot of the venues have been destroyed in Europe because of World War II and the bombings. So at Brussels World's Fair in 1958, the Philips Corporation, and they're still around today, they make TVs, they made the first CDs, they make other electronics, wanted to, in a way, promote their sonic capabilities in their sound projection systems and audio equipment. So they sponsored this grand event, the Poeme Electronique, and there are a couple other pieces performed. And there's this building that's built at the Brussels World's Fair called the Brussels Pavilion. Unfortunately, it was taken down, and you can find all kind of awesome pictures of it online. And it was designed to reflect the sounds of speakers and so forth for the performance. So Le Corbusier, this famous architect, Ioannis Xenakis, who was also a famous architect and a composer, and Edgar Varese were commissioned by the Philips Corporation to create some sort of event to use the speaker sound system that Philips created and to actually create a new genre. There's that dang coronavirus thing. Can't not touch my face. They went to create this new kind of genre. It was Philips Audio Equipment wanted to sort of usher in a new genre of art, which would be a synthesis of light, color, pictures, speech, and music displayed in an actual space. Okay, so Varese's work goes through in 7 sections the audio. Genesis, spirit and matter, from darkness, man made gods, how time molds civilization, harmony, and to all mankind. It kind of goes from the beginning of civilization through to the current time period of the day. It looks back at ancient cultures and civilizations. The sort of visual aspects of the performance were done separately. So the composer and the visual person did not work hand in hand, as might be very common today. So it's a 3-channel tape deck, diverting the musical sounds that were recorded and edited on reel-to-reel tape using razor blades and, well, you might be more familiar with a cassette tape or an 8-track tape, but a reel-to-reel tape deck. And the performance would have a time schedule, and the engineer would have to press play at certain times during the event. People would walk from room to room as they went through these 7 sort of ideas as they went from the beginning of time to the present. Okay, so this work is one of the most famous electronic works. I think 3 to 4 million people walked through that exhibit at the Brussels World's Fair. And unfortunately, because the pavilion was destroyed, and some of the original material was destroyed. We only have stereophonic or 2-channel versions. 3 channels never really caught on. Most people's, if they listen to a stereo or their phone, you have 2 channels, left and right. If you have a theater surround system, you might have 5.1 or 7.1 surround sound. You would need 3.1 surround sound to actually listen to this properly today, except that we don't have the originals. We only have the mix down to stereo, so we can't truly recreate it. So as you listen to Poeme Electronique, you might think it odd. A lot of the sounds are today would be called bleeps and bloops, but this was the beginning and the dawn of creating electronic music through speeding up and slowing down audio tape, through cutting the sounds up with razor blades, and then taping the tapes back together. And so all of the sounds are put together one by one in a very, very different way than traditional composition. But it is a very, very effective telling of a story. And like any electronic music, it becomes dated by the very technology that it uses. And so while it'd be really cool to have a 1907 Model T Ford, it's pretty outdated technology. Fuel economy wise, there's no air conditioning, there's no roof. And so while it's really cool to take part of it, it was an amazing thing at its time, it does become sort of outdated by its very technology. And this is true of most electronic music. Even if you listen to 1980s music, you'll start thinking, wow, that's a really bad synthesizer sound. Well, it was the top of the day. So please listen to Poeme Electronique by Edgar Varèse. Think about it from the sort of time perspective of beginning of time into the present, which have been the 1950s, and the notion of creating a new sort of sound world, a synthesis of light, color, picture, speech, and music displayed in space. You're seeing actual pictures and from the performance, not photos of it, but what would have been displayed, just not necessarily in the way you would have walked through it per se, because you're not in the actual building. So that is our little moment of Edgar Varèse. And if you happen to be a drummer or a percussion player, you might have played his works in marching band techniques or something like that, or advanced percussion in school. Edgar Varèse is known to have written the first piece for percussion ensemble, and his works are very, very inventive in their use of percussion.